And I've two or three items I'd like to add to the agenda. 78 Upper Prince Street. I'd like to add that item. I'd like to add Waltham Drive, work carried out by the utility in Waltham Drive. Next item I'd like to discuss is the reconstruction of Harley Street. And just a clarification on the positions filled by the utility. That would be the fourth item.
Would that be a in camera?
No, I mean, we passed it in the budget. I think,
Okay.
Like a year ago.
All right. Okay, we can add those four things.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll go into reports, and we'll ask the manager to proceed with the Union Road PID number, please.
So the first one is a request for services outside the city limits. So any request for servicing outside the city limits requires council approval. So this is an extension to services that were provided along Union Road. So we did grant permission for that. And now they've recognized that there's a couple more properties out there that they would also like to have services extended to. So it's actually Island Coastal who has put in a request to extend the services for water in that area. So all the construction costs would be covered by them, and then any new customers would be charged a 25% surcharge.
I just have a question. Richard, is that residential or is that commercial?
I would expect it to be commercial development. So the other properties that are commercial in that area?
Just to follow up, I should have been even more specific. Commercial or industrial?
That piece I'm not sure at this time. I can follow up with them to find out.
And there's no difference when it comes to residential versus industrial or commercial. It's still 25%, correct?
Correct.
Another question on that, Richard. When the water rates go up for the citizens in Charlottetown, I think we were looking at, what was it, 2%? 2% or 5% raise on an annual basis. Does that mean that services that are outside the city limits, that their rates go up as well? Or does it just stay at that 25%? Do they increase a 5% like the residents in the city have to pay?
So the rate is set for the residents, and then the rate for people outside of the city is 25% greater than that. So as there's any increase in rates within the city, those outside the city see not only that increase, but a 25% increase on top of that because of the math.
So it's done incrementally as well. It's not just for the ratepayers in the city to pay those additional costs. It is tacked on an annual basis to the 25%.
Correct.
Thank you, Richard.
So with this request, Council, did you have a question, Julie?
Just more a comment. Thank you for a moment, Chair, Councillor Don. But I was saying how many we're seeing of these out of municipality requests coming in, and I'm not sure. And I wanted to know, is that 25% a reasonable? You know, the more and more we're seeing these come in, it just seems like, is that doing what it needs to do?
It seems reasonable. I mean, really, we set our rates based on how much it costs to provide the service. So that 25% it's extra revenue for us. And there's a bit of administration or just the fact, and too, that they haven't necessarily contributed to the funding through the past, but that 25% surcharge has been with us for quite some time.
Yes, I do, Chair Bob. I mean, this is an issue I've talked about over the years. And there's no doubt about it. I feel that it's an incentive to locate outside of the city limits. and then you pay for the required service as opposed to paying for the taxes, property taxes, whether it be commercial or residential or industrial or whatever the case may be. I don't know, Richard, maybe sometime in the not too distant future, it'd be interesting to do a case study as to, what the trend is, what's the anticipated growth and development outside of the city of Charlottetown, and what can we anticipate in terms of required water and sewer services, and to look at those incentives for being outside the city limits, the advantages versus the disadvantages, and what it means to the city's corporation. So I think we should embark upon that study, a case study, maybe present it to a future water and sewer utility committee meeting, whether it be this committee or a future utility committee or committee members to look at that case study. And again, I bring it to everyone's attention the trends and what the trend has been over the last few years. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. So the request for approval to provide water services this property, do we have a mover and a seconder for that?
Just before, Mr. Chairman. This is after the 3 or 4 properties. This is actually for 3 or 4 properties, right? So we're getting an easement going through Pan American Properties for 3 to 4. I'm assuming that they're residential properties. Do we know what they're for?
So the other properties have been developed as commercial in that area along Union Road, and it's commercial property right now where we are bringing the services across. So I'll get some more information on the planned uses for it, but again, the others were commercial.
Just one second. I read here somewhere, and I'm just going to try to find it. Including the conditions is a requirement to provide water service for 3 to 4 additional lots. Presumably, they may subdivide the remaining parcels. So you think that's that whole area that they're talking about is commercial, is it? Okay.
I'm sorry, Bob, just to
No,
follow
go
up.
ahead.
Richard, in the city, does it cost more for the commercial ratepayer than it does, say, a single-family dwelling, if you're operating a commercial enterprise?
Yeah, so within the city, it depends on the size of the service. So if it's a commercial property that has a higher demand for water, they pay a higher charge. And it all depends on the size of the pipe that is bringing water to your property. So a commercial property that requires a 4-inch service, they pay more on their flat rate. The amount that they have to pay each month is greater than a family connection, but the rate per cubic meter for everyone is the same. But a commercial property that has a higher demand for water, that they do use more water, they do pay more.
Okay, so, but outside the city limits, when someone was requiring our services, it's the same thing. It's 25% for single family, or for a commercial enterprise, it could be, any type of facility. It's 25%. So it's safe to say, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's not the same. It's not the same as it is inside the city limits. There's no variation. But outside, it's 25% right across the board, regardless of whether it's industrial, commercial, residential, or multi-units, or whatever the case may be. Is that safe to say, Richard?
So regardless of what the rate is in the city, so you do pay more if you have a bigger service to your property. Outside, you also pay more, and then you also pay 25% on top of that. So if you had the identical business and service size within Charlottetown, and you have it outside, 25% more on both the flat rate and the per cubic meter consumption. Everything gets multiplied by 1.25.
So how much water you use is 25% more than a resident in the city? the volume of water you use, you charge 25% more than if you're inside the city.
I understand that, but my question was, is it different outside the city limits? Because it's 25%, and I think you did the clarification, Richard. It's based on the flat rate plus the water consumption, which is metered, correct? So it's not different if you're outside the city, commercial enterprise or industrial, versus if you were inside the city. It's all based on water consumption, correct?
So a water and sewer bill has two components to it. So if you use no water for the period, there's still a bill that you have to pay because you have service available to you. We have placed a 1-inch line or a 4-inch line into your property. And if we placed a 4-inch line to your property instead of a 1-inch line, that amount that you pay regardless, if you don't use any water at all, that amount you pay is greater because there's that capacity. We spent more money on putting the service to your property. So there's that component to the bill, and that component to the bill outside the city of Charlottetown is multiplied by 1.25. It's 25% greater for somebody outside than it is for somebody inside. And then each cubic meter of water, you also pay for that. Each cubic meter of water inside the city is a little more than $1, and outside the city, it's a little more than $1 times 1.25. So it costs more. Both aspects to the bill are increased by 25% when you're outside the city of Charlottetown.
Thank you.
I just have one more question.
Great ahead.
And I know we're in good shape right now, with our water, Richard, as far as our amount of water. Do you see any concerns? We have the annexed land now coming into Charlottetown from M&M Furniture to Jewel's Country Garden. That's, I think, 155 acres. Most of that, I think, is going to be commercial. Yeah, any concern at all about the volume of water that the commercial will be using and our future allocation that we have?
Yeah, so you will soon see a growth management study. It's in its draft form at this point in time, but it looks like we are in good shape with water consumption within the city, and maybe even into the future if we can continue with our conservation efforts. And we're actually seeing a reduction in water consumption within the city. The amount of water we are consuming now within all of Charlottetown, with all the growth we've seen, is less than it was before the year 2000. So we're almost back to the point in time of amalgamation with the amount of water that we're using, despite how much we've grown. So continued conservation efforts, it does look like we are in good shape with our water, and that growth management study does look at even supplying some water outside the city, so looking at our boundaries if they did grow in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think are we good with this recommendation? Anybody want to move it and second it? Moved by Councilor Bernard, second by, we'll go with Councilor Twill. That'd be great. Thank you. We'll move on to the next. Miltonville Park, Meadowvale Community PID number. Richard, you're back on. Thank you.
Yep, so this is another request for servicing. This is a request for wastewater servicing. It's an addition onto the Meadowvale Community Development in Miltonvale Park. So the utility did take over wastewater treatment services for that community development. Now they're looking at adding some more homes to that development. So they've asked if we would also manage that wastewater flow. So there's already a sewer main that goes through that property. So the connections would be it would be simple connections for that development.
Any questions on this?
Yeah, Richard, could you give me an indication of the scope of the development? What, in terms of, lots or units, do you have a specific amount of what they're looking to develop?
Yes, so in the package, we have included their request to Miltonvale Park. and they're looking at 23 pre-manufactured single-wide mini homes for that development.
Mini homes? Okay. Is that the mobile? Okay. That's an entire new development. Right?
It's within it's the edge of that existing development. So they have some more land that they can develop. And it was proposed a number of years ago. They just didn't move forward with the development at that time.
Okay. Our sewer line goes all the ways to Sleepy Hollow, correct?
Correct. We provide wastewater services all the way to the Sleepy Hollow Jail.
Okay.
Okay, anybody have any questions, concerns about this? Are we going to move it ahead? What do we feel? Anybody like to move it? Councillor Bernard, Councillor McCabe? Great. Is that the only two we're going here, Richard?
Yep, that was the two for the reports, and then Councillor Tweel had some additions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
Richard, as you know, 78 Upper Prince Street, it's been, I guess, a state of an influx for a number of months. There has been some work done in terms of sidewalk replacement. There's still more work to do. Wondering if you can give me a time frame when the street will be put back the way it was, and that cement will be ripped up, and there's still additional sidewalk and walkway work to be done. And just wondering if, again, you know, I'm on Upper Prince Street pretty much every day, and I know what your challenge was, and I appreciate that. But again, I'm looking for closure to all the work that needs to be done. And if you can please give me an update.
So as you noted, the sidewalk work has been completed. The landscaping in that area has been completed as well. The grass is starting to sprout. They still need to do the steps, the walkway, and the asphalt needs to be done. But the asphalt right now, it is concrete. That is one of our better locations because it is concreted, but I'll follow up with them to let them know that they can now do the asphalt work.
So the cement is going to be removed, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, yeah, please, Richard, I'd like to bring this to closure at 78 Upper Prince. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go on to your next issue there, Waltham Drive.
Yes, Waltham Drive, again, the utility did 3 major cuts on that street. There's a temporary, I'm not sure of the material that it's called, coal patching or whatever the case may be. It does make it difficult for the vehicle traffic, and there's still gravel on the street. You know, you you could say the same thing for Queen Street. There's also a couple of cuts that the utility did. Again, I'm looking for a time frame and timeline when that work will be completed, so it's easier for the vehicle traffic and easier for the pedestrian traffic.
Yeah, so, and this ties into actually your 4th point, but I'll mention it now. There's been a significant transition for us between the utility and public works. We now have an agreement in place that public works will look after those cuts for the utility. So we're working through that transition time now, but we should see those things taken care of with better equipment and hopefully in a more timely fashion. Although, there are a lot of cuts out there, and we're in that transition phase, so we're still working together and making sure that they remain passable, but we're now working with Public Works to get all those cuts taken care of.
Thank you, Richard. And again, I know you're working through the transition, and I understand, you know, the collaboration and the work that needs to be done. Again, please, I'm just looking for timeframes and timelines. I'm looking to expedite this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, I will follow up with Public Works on those, but I know they are working through this transition with us, and everybody's doing the best they can to get to those that they feel are the worst and most heavily trafficked locations first, but I will bring these up to them as well.
Thank you, sir.
Richard, can you also look into, I know since they've taken over the transition, I've had a couple of water cuts that were repaired, they paved, and since sunk. My understanding is that they're not, what's the terminology?
Compaction.
Tampering. Compaction. Yeah. Apparently, we have a compactor, but not being used.
So that
We've got to go back now and tear up new asphalt, we just put in a cut because it sunk, because it wasn't tamped. So if you could follow up on that,
thank you.
please. Thanks.
Okay, now we're on to, okay. This is your last one, or is it, do you have another one?
I got to know, just a clarification on the other
Okay,
matter.
clarification, go ahead.
Major work being done on Harley Street. I'm trying to understand who's ultimately responsible when it comes to the operations, the construction, from the city's administration, whether it be water and sewer, public works versus a contractor. I don't know. It just seems to, I just seem to go in circles, trying to keep things kind of tidy as much as possible. It's a very narrow street. I don't know why, and I don't know, Richard, if it's you or it's Public Works. You know, just the day-to-day routine, keeping the street watered down. We've had a stretch of hot weather, and that dust is all over the place. Whether it be mailboxes, heating pumps, properties, residents can't open up their windows. I don't know if it's you that deals with the contractor or is it the manager of Public Works. I assume it's a manager of Public Works, but what I'm looking for is what can we do to make things a lot easier for the residents in the community so that they can have an expectation as to when we can have that street watered down. I haven't seen the contract. I don't know what's in the contract, but I think there should be a requirement, and there must be a requirement, to keep that street watered down, particularly with all the hot weather we've been having. I don't understand why it's such a struggle, to be honest with you. I really don't understand it. I mean, I go through there, I hear from the residents, and these are routine things that should be taken care of and should be addressed, effectively addressed. And I just, you know, every second or third day, Richard, and you're included in the correspondence. I make sure that you are because of utility. And a follow-up to that is, while utility was doing the water testing, you had that company in, is there no other work that can be completed while that testing is taking place? That's a question that one of the residents, I'm sure you've read that in the correspondence.
Yeah, so, I mean, there is a contractual obligation for them to do their best to mitigate dust. And as you noted, there may have been periods of time where it was very challenging for them to do that, but they do need to work at it and do their best with it. And there are others who are there to provide oversight, and we work with them on that. And I believe you do have correspondence from the manager to address the manager of Public Works to be looking at that for you. For the water testing piece, so we are testing that water line that is really in the middle of the street, and we want to make sure that it's going to pass all those tests, because if it doesn't pass the test, then you need to dig it up. So you wouldn't want them to proceed further with any work and then have us needing to go in to dig up that water line. So kind of you make sure that you do things in a proper order so that you're not backtracking. So you test the water main, and then as soon as the water main passes, then you can make the connections into the residents' homes. And we don't want to make those connections before we are assured that the water quality within that water main is acceptable for our residents. So they follow a proper sequence so that that you're not backtracking and tearing out work that you've already completed.
I understand that, Richard, I really do. I guess one of the things I've tried to bring forth to both water and sewer and public works was, you know, be that as it may, that we've got to communicate that to the residents. We've got to communicate that information to the residents. When they see all of the equipment hauled away and they're gone, not there for a week, then you're into week 2, there's no equipment. I mean, they got to have the information. The residents have to have the information. It's a high-density area. It's a narrow street. They need to have that information, and I've recommended that on several occasions. And I'm sure the CAO has noted that as well. I mean, we have great opportunities. We can do press releases, do social media, we can do additional letters to the residents in the community. I don't know why we can't do that. The more information the residents have, the more aware they're going to be and the more patient they're going to be. But if they don't have the information, then they're asking questions and I'm trying to get them answers. And, you know, when you have your senior administration meetings, when you're doing projects of this magnitude, communications is imperative. It's imperative and it's essential. They need that information. So please put that in your, you know, in your list of things that need to be done. And the more, again, we can do press releases and we can say, here's why they're not on the street for a week and a half or for 2 weeks. And they moved all the heavy artillery out of there and they've gone on to another job. And then they're going to be coming back. But here's why. I don't know why there's a hesitation, or maybe that's not the right word, but it would make my job that much easier the more information that the residents have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that, Richard. I think that's all the questions you had for there. What about your last question, Councillor Twill?
Richard, wasn't this budget, it was the previous budget, we approved, was it 3 positions, full-time positions? I noticed we got an email there from the Human Resource Department. Is that the same thing, or they're not full-time positions that they're talking about, are they?
No, I think, no. Go, you can answer it there, Richard. Go ahead.
Yeah, correct. So the announcement you saw was 3 new utility staff hired, but you're also correct. And since we had our last meeting, we have signed the memorandum of understanding that relates to the landscaping and asphalting work. And we do have 3 employees who have gone from part-time status to full-time status.
Was that what I read in the correspondence from the Human Resource Department? Or is
Nope.
that additional?
What you read in the correspondence from HR, I believe, was 3 new part-time hires.
It's not the full-time positions that we approved a year and a half ago, correct?
Correct. But there are 3 utility employees who have gone from being part-time employees to full-time employees.
And they've since have been hired.
So they were already employees with the utility. Their status went from part-time to full-time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard. I'm sure we'll get an email who they are, will we?
It's a good idea.
We already did?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, that concludes everything, Councillor Twill. Your questioning for today?
Thank you for your patience, Chair.
No problem at all. And we good to go into a closed session, Richard?
So if you need more time later to review it and get back to me with any feedback.
The letter looks good to me.
Okay. Good to you, Councillor Twill? Did you get to look at it? No.
No, I don't think this was part of the open session, but I mean, it's just the letter that we discussed last month about the letter being so strong on people that still owe money on their water.
Oh,
So it could be just 3 months and they've got a letter that they're going to turn the water off.
oh, okay.
So then we would ask the manager to soften up that letter that goes out, which he did. He put a copy in the package.
No problems.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that as well.
I think it looks
So,
good.
How about you, Councillor McCabe? Good? Yeah. Everything's good? Great job, Richard. Now we're going to move into...
Just kudos to our finance people. They brought it forward to me.
Perfect.
They're the ones deserving all the credit.
Awesome. So now we'll motion to move into closed session as per section 119.1 subsection E of the PEI Municipal Government Act. Councillor McCabe moves it. Councillor Bernard seconds it. So now we'll go into a closed session. Thank you.